What's up, guys? It's your boy Wimpy, back with another podcast. And today, I'm going to be putting all my theories and philosophies to the test, putting them in practice, and giving my testimony. So, talk is cheap. And somebody once told me that man only gets a few opportunities in his life to prove himself. And this is one of those opportunities for me that God has given me. So, I'll be giving my testimony. And this is going to definitely hurt me. This will almost certainly, if the right people watch this to the end, will almost certainly guarantee that I go to prison for a while. And a lot of people will probably hate me, judge me, or think I'm crazy after they get done watching this, which is fine. It's this stuff I've been preaching, not to worry about other people's opinions of you, overcoming the fear, the opinions of others, and overcoming the fear of death, and even persecution. So, my testimony. We can start at the beginning of time, the Big Bang, the atheists will say, or the creation story, whatever. But every little thing that happened, whether it came from one atom or one God, led us to this moment. Every little detail, every little mistake, every great person that came along to push humanity forward or hold it back has led to me being born. Being born on March 3rd, 2003. 333. For me, 333 means hope. And that might be important later on. But that's when I was born. And, growing up, I wouldn't say I had the most fun and enjoyable life. I was always pushed to be a perfectionist. And I was expected to do great things, or to do my best, or what was more than best. And eventually I get to high school, and then that's when I have to start deciding what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, who I want to be. And, I didn't grow up playing football, but about 8th grade, 7th grade, I started playing. I believe 8th grade, JV. And then I started getting into sports. Before that, I was a nerd, just played video games all the time. But I decided I wanted to, exert myself. And, it took a while. I didn't get a starting position until my junior year. I had to put in a lot of work, a lot of effort, And, of course, there's always haters along the way who want to say that you didn't get there naturally, say you were on steroids, but they didn't see the hours of work you put in behind the scenes, the sleepless nights, so on and so forth. They just see you doing what they can't do, and they want to make excuses for why they can't do it. But I was playing football, but I played D-line at first, junior year. And, I was a small guy. I've always been a small guy. I'm about 5'6.5". And about at that time, I weighed like maybe 145, 150 pounds. So the people I was going up against on the line weighed more than double my weight. I looked like a grasshopper compared to these people. But I played with heart, and I didn't give up. In my senior year, I was a second or third string running back, but somebody got injured, so coach came and asked me if I'd play center on the O-line. I said, I'll do whatever the team needs me to do. So I played center. And my senior year, I played almost every second on the ball. I believe that this is foreshadowing what I might later do in my life, going up against giants. On the line, I was a little guy going up against people that weighed more than double my weight, okay? But I always played with heart. So, other than that, high school was uneventful. I did my fair share of partying and drinking and so on and so forth. But what I really wanted to do was be remembered. I got onto the David Goggins grind. I wanted to be the best I could be. I wanted to be a general at the end of the day. I wanted to fight for the good guys. I wanted to be there to do great things and have my name remembered in history as a good guy, So, of course, I joined the Army. And, well, it was a culture shock when I got there. I was expecting something disciplined, something more. But when I got there, I realized it was all a hoax. All bullshit advertising. It was a joke, really. The standards had went to shit, I was in combat MOS, so you have combat standards. If you can't perform these tasks, you shouldn't be in a combat role. Well, a majority of the company couldn't pass these tests, so they just let these kids pass, all right? And that just foreshadowed what the Army was becoming. And a lot of these kids, they didn't really care about fighting for their country or patriotism or some deeper sense of meaning. They just wanted the clout, They just wanted to post it on their Instagram, their uniform, and how cool they looked. But I realized this. I was looking at all this, and it kind of made me disgusted. But I kept on going, The goal was, get my enlisted time in, reserves, then go to college, do ROTC, become an officer, and then climb up the ladder, be the best I could be. So, went along with the plan, finished basic, did my enlisted stuff, and went to college. Started going to college and got into the Mountain Order Columbo, which is probably the hardest thing I've ever done, and learned a lot of stuff from there. Just taught me a lot of lessons and wisdom. And, yeah, I did that for a few semesters, but once I finished, I was confronted with this idea that, this is just how it's going to be at the end. Like, what happens when I finish my goals like this? I'm going to feel empty. And although that program did build a lot of discipline for people and it turned boys into men, it also became a double-edged sword, because then that became their identity. That's all they could talk about, and that's a big problem in the Army. Like, people, that becomes their identity. They're nothing more than just a soldier, nothing more than just a climb member. And now that I had all this free time, because usually I'd be just spending all my time grinding, I had time to think. And I started thinking about all the things I grew up with that might have been wrong, the ideas that I had about the Army and about what I wanted to be, all could be wrong, All these different ideas, factors played a part in what I decided to do. And I would like to jump back to me growing up, You are a product of your environment. In my environment, I do remember when I was growing up that either my mother or some church group or something was reading us the passage in the Bible where Solomon was asked by God, ask me anything and I'll give it to you. And then Solomon asked for wisdom, and God was pleased with this and gave him wisdom plus everything else. And I remembered hearing that story, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. So I went and prayed for wisdom. I probably would have never prayed for wisdom if I didn't hear that story. I'm a product of my environment. Every little detail has made me who I am. But wisdom comes at a price, Nothing's free. Everything comes at a price. And wisdom has a very hefty price tag attached to it. King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, he who increases in wisdom increases in sorrow. And I had to learn that the hard way. But I don't regret it. It's better to be wise and sad than to be a fool and not be of any importance, or to cause harm to others because of your foolishness and your wickedness. But jumping back forward, I decided to drop out of college. There was this idea of letting go, and Fight Club played a big part in that. It just letting go of everything, letting go of control, letting go of my preconceived notions that I grew up with, whether it be with religion. I grew up in a Christian household. My mom always took me to church, and the idea that America might not be the good guys. All the past wars, all the way back to Vietnam, were based off of lies, all on lies. And maybe our country is very corrupt. Our politicians don't really care about us, and there's nothing we could do about it. I became very cynical, and I came up with the idea, George Carlin came up with it, but it fit the army and soldiers very well, that slaves look good in uniform. And that's very true, okay? But I fell through with it. A lot of people didn't have the balls to do that. A lot of people talked about how much they hated the Corps of Cadets and how much they wished to leave and stuff like that, but they never did it. They just like to complain, but they never did anything about it. I actually had the balls to drop out and jump into the unknown, go on my own journey, all right, which looked bad. One of my advisors said that I was the biggest waste of potential he's ever seen. But I think I fulfilled my potential by dropping out. I don't regret it at all. And I went on a journey. I kind of veered away from Christianity and became, I guess you'd say, an agnostic. I started diving into these different books with these huge ideas that they never taught in church, And I'm like, how could they not be talking about this in church? This is so profound. And then I went down this whole journey of learning, reading, and just going on my own journey to repeat myself. I tried starting a business with one of my good buddies. Didn't work out. I learned a lot of lessons that, there's a cost to pay for running a business, all right? And that cost is stress and the pursuit of money, which might not bring you joy. So that wasn't what I wanted to do. And going down the religious and spiritual journey, I'd argue with one of my buddies who became a preacher. I was trying to get him to read some books that I read that, really opened my mind. And he's like, I'll tell you what, if you read the Bible, I'll read these books. And at the time I was like, okay, I don't really feel like reading the Bible. I don't think I'll get a whole lot out of it. It's very long. It's probably boring. So I didn't give too much thought into it. But eventually I did. And when I went into reading the Bible, I was trying to read it so I could disprove it in a sense. Not disprove God's existence, but disprove the dogmas of Christianity. In a way, I did, okay? But when I was reading the Bible, I just stumbled upon this wealth of knowledge and wisdom in there, all this stuff in there. And the proof of the Bible to me was the rhythm to it. They say history repeats or rhymes, and so does the Bible. And I see these rhythms in the Bible, and I spoke about it in my first podcast, how I believe that we are the generation of Joshua and Caleb entering the promised land. We have to believe that we can defeat the giants, and then we can enter the promised land. Moses' generation, our parents' generation, and their generations before them, they didn't get to enter the promised land because they didn't believe, and they were afraid. But yeah, I read the Bible. I actually devoted a lot of time to it. But building up to that, I read a good bit of it, I believe, until... Actually, no, I didn't. I read a little bit of it, and then I went down another rabbit hole. I went back to college. I decided that I wanted to go back to study psychology and sociology because I believe that all the world's problems is due to psychology and sociology, which I still do believe, and I've been talking about that in my podcast, but I came to realize that this college that I was going to now, it's not for education, it's for indoctrination. And I was in the belly of the beast, the sociology and psychology program, but I learned very quickly that these people, they're not teaching you like new and nuanced ideas to help people. It's all about incentives. Psychology now is more about prescribing people SRIs and medications to fix a chemical imbalance instead of how it was back in the day, talking people through their problems, diving into philosophy, trying to get through it naturally instead of just taking a bunch of medications, which makes the drug companies a lot of money. But that plus sociology, very Marxist. I was reading a textbook, very Marxist, and I read like the first chapter and I was like, no, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And here's where things get interesting. All right, around this time, this is when I started to have some spiritual experiences, which is the real reason why I truly believe in God. All right, is because I've experienced him, because he has stepped into my life. There's several times where I should have died, but through coincidences, I didn't die. All right, and sometimes I'm left wondering, why am I still alive? What does God want me for? What am I here to do? All right, and I guess that's what I'll find out. But around this time, this is where people will start to think I'm crazy. Carl Jung can sympathize with me because he went through very similar things. I had two visions. All right, and visions are very different from dreams. It's like a snapshot. It's like you're there for a moment. All right, and I had these back to back. And the first one was just a snapshot of me looking at my computer, seeing that I got 100 on an assignment. And this will be relevant for later, but it was the third assignment in my sociology class, Introduction to Sociology. I got 100 on it. Then immediately after that, I got another snapshot in the future where I was holding, I don't know how, I just knew that it was my daughter. And I was sitting on the couch holding her, looking at my phone. It was just a snapshot. I woke up and I was like, am I going insane? Like, what's going on here? But, I was like, I'm going to test this out. Like, I haven't been graded on my third assignment yet. So let's see if this comes true. Well, here's the funny part. All right. So like I was saying, in the sociology class, it was teaching Marxism in the textbook. We had assignments for each chapter we read to do keywords and like these key concepts and stuff. Well, I read the first chapter, so I did the first assignment, but I was like, I'm not reading the rest of this book. This is a waste of my time. So what I did was just copy and pasted the first assignment onto the next two and just turned them in. Well, funny enough, of course, I got 100 on the first assignment because I actually did it. On the second one, I got like a 70. She must have looked at it and realized that I either copied and pasted it or must have just misunderstood the assignment. I don't know what was going through her head. But on the third one, for some reason, I made 100. So that's what kind of opened my eyes, like, whoa, maybe there's something to this, okay? And I believe that was God, like, proving to me, like, that the next one, which is way, way farther out, will come true. All right, in my interpretation, it's a promise that things will get better. And I really needed that because I was about to hit very hard times in the coming year. That's where everything began to fall apart. And it was that vision that really kept me going, kept me moving forward. All right, because I've thought about how nice it would be just to die. It'd be so much better. So peaceful. I wouldn't have to worry about all this suffering and stuff going on in my life. But we'll get into the hard times now. So like around that time, I was in college for the second time. I ended up stopped doing my assignments because they whipped out the gender unicorn, and that's when I was officially like, okay, I'm done for sure, and I just stopped doing my assignments. But around that time, okay, well, I guess before that time in January, I went up to a place in the mountains to ski with one of my buddies. Well, when I was up there the night before we went skiing, we decided to go out to a bar, and I tried out the White Claw surges. Never had them before, but they're high percentage, and I was just funneling them, shotgunning them, and by the time I got to the bar, I was wasted. And when I was going into the bar, I was finishing my last one, and then I threw the can in the trash, or the can in the trash can right beside the bouncer. He looks at me and he's like, "Hey, you can't go in there." I didn't know that you can't drink before going into a bar, but, well, now I found out. And I won't go through all the details, but I ended up just wandering. I said to my buddies, just go on without me. I'll figure something out. Went on my own adventure. Well, eventually ran into cops because apparently I was stumbling and about fell into a highway. And they were asking me questions like, who are you staying with? Who bought you alcohol? I was under 21 at the time. And in my head, I was like, they're trying to get me to snitch on my buddies for buying me alcohol. So I just fed them a bunch of bullshit. I wasn't snitching on my buddies, when in reality, they were probably just trying to get me home. And then eventually I was like, just arrest me, because I wasn't giving them nothing. They arrested me for underage drinking, and I spent the night in jail. My friends eventually found out that I was in jail, got me out. That was the beginning, all right? So all these factors are going to build up here, all right? So pay attention. Well, the court date is pushed off like a month or two ahead. So I go back to where I'm doing college, and then eventually the day comes where I got to go back up there. It's a good ways away. It's about 4 hours or 3 hours, maybe in between that 3.5. But the plan was to go up there and to see my buddy, go to court in the morning, all right? Then see my buddy, go out, maybe have a few beers, then sober up, drive back home because I have an exam the next morning. I got to make it. Well, of course, things never go as planned. Go to court, they say, all right, we'll drop it, just do community service, blah, blah, blah. And I, continue to hang out with my buddies, want to make a trip out of it, haven't seen them in a while. But one of the guys he knew that I just met, he heard a lot about me, and he's like, "Hey, Wimpy, shotgun a Four Loko with me," all right? He had a bootlegger, but it's like, shotgun a Four Loko with me. And, of course, my pride wouldn't allow me to say no, and I shotgunned the Four Loko, held it in like a champ, went to Chili's, and that was the beginning of the end, all right? Once I had that Four Loko in me, I just kept on drinking, smoking. And then eventually it was very late, and then I remember, I got to get back to college. So I head home. And then about halfway through, I started getting drowsy. So I put into my phone like the nearest 24/7 gas station so I could get an energy drink, but I didn't make it. I went as far as I could, as far as I possibly could. I was not giving up. And I just ended up stopping at a stoplight, and I was so tired that I just had enough energy to put it in park and fall asleep. Now I woke up, paramedics knocking on the window, state trooper rolls up, boom, DUI, go to prison. Jail, not prison. Spend the night, get my mom to bail me out, yada, yada, yada. That was number one. I didn't really care about it. It was like a smack on the wrist. I was like, okay, I'll just get it over with. Pled guilty, didn't really fight it, got a public defender, just showed up to court, got it over with. Well, then they hit me with, 1 year of license suspension, and I got to do DUI classes and all this and that, fine. Well, I need to drive. I got to go do things. I got a life, all right? Now, in today's world, you have to drive. So I was going to go through the proper course and get my blow and go in my truck. So I go to the court. The court's like a ways out, so I got to drive all the way up there, get my lawyer to go talk to the judge and stuff, pay my fines, get him to sign my form for the blow and go. I go get insurance, get the blow and go, everything. I go through all these steps, spend all this money. And about a week after I get it, DMV sends me a letter saying that they will not recognize it because you were under 21 when you got this conviction. When you got arrested. And I was like, damn. So I took it out. And here's how this all is building up. Okay, so I got that first arrest, underage consumption, at that specific time. But when I went back, it was on that specific date to go to court and get it taken care of. Well, that was like 2 days before my 21st birthday. So I got this DUI 2 days before my 21st birthday. And if I got it 2 days later, I might have been able to keep my blow and go, and I might not be here today in this chair. So, yes, it's a blessing in the end, but we'll get into that. So I rip out the blow and go. I'm like, well, I gotta drive. I gotta work. I'm not in college anymore. I have to have a life, you know. And if the government says, like, hey, you can't drive, you can't live because we told you no, I'm like, well, fuck you guys. I gotta live. So I keep on driving. And I'm working at this place, doing all right, still drinking. You know, I always had a drinking problem, and I had a problem with stop drinking. Once I start, I just have to keep going until I black out. And I'm blacked out several times. But, you know, later on down the line, things are getting worse. I moved back home with my father, and I felt guilty about this too, because I felt like I left him because he's all alone and he has multiple sclerosis and he's getting worse. I grew up with this and watching him slowly get worse, and it wasn't happy, we'll just put it that way. And I just felt bad for not being there for him, so I moved back home. But of course, it's not happy living in an environment like that. So there's that, plus this event that was this is where things really started to get really bad. In my view, I was betrayed by somebody very close to me. And that's when reality kind of shattered for me. Started going a little bit insane. You know, I started to getting very paranoid. I stopped trusting people. And things got bad. But, well, not long after that, maybe a month or two after that, there was this instance, and this is probably the most specific example I can give of a spiritual experience where God no doubt had a hand in this, because there were so many coincidences that led to it. But this one day, I get done working, and at the time, I was getting all these, I saw this clip of, I forget who it was. I believe it was Sean Ryan talking about angel numbers, and he's talking about this specific one, 444. And I started seeing it everywhere. But you could say that that's psychology, where if your buddy gets a Ford F-150, now you're starting to see Ford F-150s everywhere, because that's now your mind's made that connection and it's looking for it. But here's the crazy thing: yeah, that could be a thing. But that specific day, my boss sent me the address of where we would be working next, and it had 444 in it. It was 4440 so-and-so address. And I was like, whoa, all right. And I also got something in my feed that said John 444, and I was like, that might be it. That might be what 444 is meaning. Well, I looked it up. You guys can look it up for yourselves, what John 444 means. But it's in parentheses, it's Jesus saying, for Jesus himself claimed that not even a prophet is honored in his hometown, which is very relevant for what happens next. So I'm going home, and I get a call from my buddy. He's telling me about how one of our friends that we hung out with in high school, his little brother shot himself. And he's telling me about how he's still alive. They flew him to a hospital. And at the time, I had the belief that you don't pray for anything, just be grateful, and whatever, God knows what you need before you ask, and everything's going to happen according to his plan. So there's no need to ask, because things are going to happen according to his will anyways. And honestly, I still do believe that. But I was telling him that, and call ends, and that really disturbed me, because now I'm really thinking, like, maybe if I have enough faith, this kid will live. Like, and I told him, I was like, well, if he's still alive, he's going to survive. But that was very ignorant of me to say, because, well, later on I go to my friend's house, and that's when the news is broke that he didn't survive. And that really kind of hit me. And, of course, what I do naturally is go and start buying alcohol and start drinking it. Well, that particular night, I didn't have much. I mean, I happened to buy these Belgian beers I never drunk before, but they were a high percentage, just a little six-pack, and drunk one, and I was like, okay, I'm heading home. So I decided to head home. But on the way home, I'm listening to music. I'm thinking, well, I don't want to go back home to my slowly dying father, miserable house. I just want to sit here, ride around, and just finish off this alcohol and enjoy the night. So that's what I did. Drove around for several hours, and then I'm out of Zins. Okay, another coincidence. So I decide, I'm going to go to the gas station and get some Zins. Well, another coincidence. Earlier that week, my buddy told me that cops are legally not allowed to sit on the side of the road with their lights off. Well, I had to find out the hard way that wasn't true. But I was in that mindset as I was driving, I was speeding on a highway, which is very unwise, but I'm thinking, like, if I see headlights in the distance, I know there's a cop there. If there's no headlights, that means there's no cops there. And even if there is and they pull me over, it's illegal. That it's an improper procedure of arrest. Well, turns out that they can sit with their lights off, and I pass a cop going 96 and 55, and, well, shut my lights off, pull into a parking lot, and then, of course, he's right behind me, gets me out, arrests me, and the only thing I do kind of feel bad about that night is lying to him. I'd said that I didn't drink as much as I did, and a lot earlier than I actually did. All right, that's the only thing I feel bad about for that I think is kind of wrong. But the parking lot that I pulled into happened to be a church. Never been to this church before, never really noticed it. And the name of this church was the New Life Church. And, of course, they sent me to jail. I'm there for a night. Mom bails me out. But they put me in the newspaper, put me on blast in my hometown. The previous DUI was somewhere else. Here they're putting me on blast in my hometown. So that John 4:44 thing, it's becoming very relevant. For not even a prophet is honored in his hometown. So, like, I'm seeing all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, am I going crazy? Am I going loony here? Like, what's going on? It's kind of freaking me out a little bit. Because all these little details led me to that church parking lot and to the jail. All right. But looking at it on a grander scale, starting all the way from the beginning of time, everything has led up to where I have ended. So I do not regret anything that I did or have done or will do. Okay. I'll try to be the best person that I can, but really, I don't believe we have free will. I believe that I have been programmed by God a certain way. He has raised me a certain way, like a father raises a son to be a certain way. And this is how he's raised me. But that was the second one, all right? Already taken care of those two. But the third one is still on the table. Well, eventually, I end up quitting my job because of my boss. He's a very angry dude, and I didn't feel like dealing with it anymore, so just stopped. I didn't show up to work, stopped going. Well, for a while, it got really bad. No job. You think your job sucks until you quit it and you don't have anything to do. You just sit in your house all day. I don't usually play video games, and I hadn't for a long time, but now that I have all this free time, I started just playing games and stuff, trying to pass time, and it was miserable. It was miserable. I couldn't find anything enjoyable in what I did, and I started drinking a lot, heavily. It was bad. And then I remember there was this instance where I go to see one of my buddies, and, like, I kind of break down a little bit. I'm like, everything's going wrong. Like, Dad's getting really bad. He's getting really sick. And, like, while I was gone, he fell over and went to a hospital, this and that. Grandma's got Alzheimer's. Grandpa's dead. Like, the family's falling apart. I felt like I was being a bitch at the end of the day. I was being a pussy. And then after, like, venting for a while, like, I went to sleep and woke up the next morning, and I was like, man, you are such a fucking bitch. You're going to sit here and complain about this? Why don't you do something about it? So that kind of flipped a switch in me. So I was like, I got to find something. I got to find a reason to live. I got to find a purpose. So I decided, like, everybody thinks I'm a good fighter. Like, people have told me that I'd make a really good fighter, could fight in the UFC and stuff. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And the main goal, like always, like in the back of my mind, after reading the Bible, I find out what the real meaning of life is, or the real meaning of humanity, what we're building up towards, the kingdom of God. That's the end goal. So in my thought process is, I get really good at fighting, I become a world champion UFC, and then I have a platform. I have authority to speak on podcasts. Then I could start a podcast and start preaching the gospel, preaching the good news. All right? So that was the plan. And I get into it. I gave it everything I had. I didn't have a job, but I mowed lawns, and it made just enough money so I could buy food and just stay afloat to pay the gym membership or the jiu-jitsu membership, walk, run during the day, stretch, watch jiu-jitsu, try to get all these forms. Like, everything was dedicated towards it. Every little detail, everything I ate. And I did this for about a month, went to a jiu-jitsu tournament, lost in no gi, but got a gold in gi. Keep in mind, I was going up against only one person in gi. So I got gold, he got silver. But coincidentally, he's the guy who beat me in no-gi. But I learned quick the point system. I got beat by points the previous two things, and it's very short, but I learned. Well, I was doing good, but then I kind of fell off. And I started hanging out with my old crew. Before that, I was just completely alone, like just focusing on grinding, but then I kind of fell into old crew and then started kind of laxing up a little bit, stopped being as disciplined, still doing jiu-jitsu and everything, but not as much. And then I dislocated my shoulder again. And previously, I dislocated my shoulder like 11 times because I never really did rehab. I just kept on going, getting it back in place, kept on going until eventually, like, it would come out in my sleep because my fucking shoulder was shot. So I had to get surgery to keep it in so it wouldn't come out when I was sleeping or coughing or sneezing. Well, lost my train of thought, guys. But I had surgery on it, and I let it rest for a year or maybe a year and a half, maybe more, until I started this jiu-jitsu at this point. And, well, I dislocated it again, only after like a month and a half of doing it. That was what was keeping me going. That was what was keeping me from drinking. I hadn't drunk for a month because I was so focused on jiu-jitsu and stuff. Even when I went back to hanging out with my friends, I might have previously said that I started drinking with them again, but I didn't actually start. I started hanging out with them again. Maybe I did start. Maybe I drank a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I did. But I didn't start, like, drinking every weekend and almost, like, several days of the week until after I dislocated my shoulder. And in my mind, it was like, I'm done. Like, my shoulder shot, I just tore out the staples and stuff. Like, this is it. And my purpose was ripped from me. Now I have no purpose. And then I fell into this pit again. So I started drinking all the time. I start, just stop giving a fuck anymore. Stop being careful. And still have one convicted DUI and one DUI pending. And then, after that second one, I was a lot more careful. But I was still driving. All right? But still then, if I was going out to hang out with my friends and drink, I'd get somebody else to pick me up and take me to go drink. But at this time, I moved from my father's house to my grandma's house, who had pretty bad who has pretty bad Alzheimer's, and living there wasn't too happy either. But so I'm waiting for him to come. I text him, it's planned, we're gonna go play poker, blah blah blah. And I'm sitting there, I already bought my beer, I'm just sipping on it, waiting, and then I text him, waiting, and then after a certain amount of time and after a certain amount of beers, I decide, you know what, fuck it, I'll just drive there. I'm tired of being a burden, and I'm tired of waiting on this guy, I'll just drive there. So I drive there, hang out, play poker for a little bit, don't drink too much. And then, I want to leave, I decide to go, but then, buddies decide, hey, we're going to go to the casino. And I just couldn't resist. I was like, yeah, I'll go to the casino with you. Well, we go to the casino, stop by the gas station, get a buzz ball, a bunch of beer, head to the casino, go in, gamble. I lose a few $100. And we decide to go back. On the way back, they're passing around the buzz ball. We're chugging. And, in my mind, I have church next morning. I promised one of my buddies that I'd go to church with him. He was going to come and pick me up. And before that, I believe the previous weekend or something, I didn't show up, or I told him that I'd go with him, but he forgot to come pick me up, and I didn't feel like going. I slept in, so it wasn't really anybody's fault. But this time I was like, yeah, I'll go with you for sure. So, I felt like I had to go. And, well, we get back to the house, and, I'm already blitzed at this point. It's very late, and get in my car. I'm like, let's go. Well, it wasn't really my car. It was my mom's car that I took. But driving back, and it's very late, so I start falling asleep. Fall asleep, swerve on the side, then overcorrect into a parking lot. And it kind of damaged the car a little bit, so I tried to re-crank it to drive off, couldn't, and then at that point, I wasn't terribly far from my house. I could have got out and walked, or I could have called my buddies, but at that point, in my mind, I was like, I'm fucked, this is what you get. So I just passed out. I just accepted my fate right there. Woke up the next morning, woman, on the phone with the cops outside. I get out and look at the damage, fucked the car up, totaled it. Then cops show up, fine. Luckily, I had one last cigarette. I was like, oh, thank God, one last cigarette. Smoke it. Cop comes, state trooper comes, puts me in cuffs, finds I'm drunk, takes me to jail, spend time in jail for a week. And that's the one that I'm on trial for right now. And that's why this podcast is going to probably, for sure, lead to my conviction, because I just confessed in detail to committing a crime, which is fine. Because, I've been out on here preaching a lot of stuff, and it wouldn't be fair for me to be preaching this stuff if I didn't actually live it. So here you go. Well, that was actually a blessing. I was reading the Brothers Karamazov at the time, the one I keep bringing up, and I had the privilege of reading that in jail at the time. And everything that I was reading, it was lining up, like I said, all these coincidences. It's as I'm reading this book, it's kind of showing up in my life. It's I don't know, it's crazy. It's an experience. And I had the privilege of reading it in jail, and that was just something else, something that not many people get to experience. Very few, if any, all right? So that's the whole story, or, well, most of it at least. To go into all my little adventures and all the shit I've done, the stupid shit I've done, and maybe even the good things I've done. It'd take hours and hours. Maybe when I'm in prison, I'll write a book about it. But long story short, I've said before in my podcast that I believe I'm innocent. And, I've flipped in the Bible. After that last DUI I got, I really did believe, man, I fucked up this time. How could I do this? I got to quit drinking. I got to quit this and this. And I'll put this out there just because people will look down upon it. And I got to practice what I preach. I have a porn addiction too. Nicotine addiction, alcohol, whole kit and caboodle. I'm not a perfect person. But, like, in jail, it was actually kind of nice. I felt free there because I wasn't surrounded by all this temptation, and I actually slept pretty well, aside from my back hurting because I slept on a metal bracket. It was peaceful, It was peaceful. And then I get out, and I'm instantly thrown back into this world that's filled with lust and temptation around every corner and judgment. That's a beautiful thing in there. People don't judge you. But on the outside world, there's plenty of judgment to go around. Go to church, and as soon as, I get out of jail, Mom takes me to church. As soon as I get in there, it's all judgment. The Muslims, they hate you, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what the heck am I getting into? And that kind of opened my eyes a lot. But anyways, I went on a tangent, and I forgot where I was coming from. Where was I coming from? Oh, innocence. Like I said, flipped in the Bible. After that, I flipped through the Bible several times. Or I'll just open it to see where it lands. Lands on the end of Job, where he's like, God says, Job, you've spoken rightly about me. You are innocent. Your friends are all wrong. And he rebukes his friends. I'm paraphrasing here, but Job was actually innocent while everybody around him was claiming that he was guilty. In a way, I believe that those DUIs that I've been charged with and convicted of, they were supposed to happen. That's exactly how everything was supposed to happen. I also said that I'll open the Bible more than 3 times. All right, I just landed on Job 3 times. 2 times, 1 time, it's an instance. 2 times, it's a coincidence. 3 times, it's a pattern. Well, I flipped through more than 3 times, more than 5 times, I'm sure, on to Romans chapter 9, where it talks about how, some vessels are made for destruction, others for mercy. And that's given me a lot of peace. It's okay, I might have made mistakes in my life, all right? I might have done things that have made my life worse, but it's all a part of the plan. Everything has happened for a reason. I've become infinitely wiser because I've dropped out of college, because certain influences influenced the way I thought to make me leave college. Or, that influence of hearing the story of King Solomon, asking for wisdom, and that's what influenced me to ask for wisdom. All these different factors brought me to this moment right now, and I regret none of it. I'm actually grateful for it because it's allowed me to prove myself, all right, as a man. Because, I just confessed to the crime, which will land me in prison for at least 1 year. At least 1 year, okay, unless a miracle happens. But why don't I think that a DUI is a crime? All right, because I will argue that. I've been drinking and driving since I'm 16. I will admit also, I'm a big fan of telling the truth, even if it leads to your death, that, I've been drinking and driving since I was 16. As soon as I could drive, I was drinking and driving. Hundreds of times I've drunk and drove. You know how many people I've killed? 0. You know how many people I've hurt drinking and driving? 0. So, in my view, and this is natural law theory, which Aquinas, I don't know if he came up with it, but he's quoted with it and supported it. It's that laws should be based on morals. And if a law is not based on morals, then you shouldn't obey the law, all right? Well, I don't think that DUI laws are based on morals, especially not the 3-strike law, which I'm about to be hit with. That's going to send me to prison for a minimum of 1 year, which takes the power out of our judicial branch and puts it into the power of the legislative branch. Before then, the judicial branch had the freedom to decide how long sentences were, depending on the circumstances, because each circumstance is different. But then the legislation wrote it into law that, after you commit 3 crimes, 3 strikes, you're out. you're going to prison for a minimum of this long. And the drug on wars, this and that. There's incentives here. You know, there's a prison industrial complex. I won't get into that. But I believe a crime has to do with a victim, all right? If there's a victim, it's a crime, all right? And the same amount of hurt you apply to that victim should be applied to you, all right? It's not about just following the rules, and it's not just about speculation. Speculation doesn't hold up in court, all right? Speculation is the idea that something could have happened. The whole DUI laws are based off of speculation, all right? The idea that I could have killed somebody. Well, I've drunk and drove more than hundreds of times, all right, hundreds of times. And I've managed to kill absolutely no one this far, all right? And I never intended to kill anybody. I've never intended to hurt nobody. I consider myself a good person. Yes, I have my flaws, but I try to be better, all right? And I try to do good. Now, hopefully this podcast does this, but, of course, I am going to have to pay the piper. All right, I did break the law, and there is consequences for that, and that's fine, all right? If a jury of my peers convicts me guilty, then that's fine, you know? If people think I'm a piece of shit because I drink and drive, that's fine, all right? This is all the stuff I've been talking about, you know, overcoming the opinions of others and overcoming the opinion of death, and even prison in this case, which could possibly lead to death, but you know, of course, I have the promise I was telling you about, unless you believe I'm crazy or unless I'm actually crazy, that I'll make it through this, all right? And the way I view it is, this is like, you know, going to be a Navy SEAL or going to be a Green Beret. Green Beret pipeline's 2 years long, all right? Let's say I get sentenced to prison for 2 years. In my mind, that's like my training camp. I'm going to be the DUI Green Beret. But at the end of it, I don't get medals. I don't get a Green Beret. I don't get praise. I don't get applause. Instead, I get spit on. You know, people look down upon me. They think I'm a common criminal, a piece of shit. And, you know, I don't get a whole lot of recognition for it. But at the end of it, I believe I'm going to be wiser. I'm definitely going to be more patient. I have all the time in the world just to read the Bible and focus on what actually matters instead of having to worry about paying bills and doing different things. It's going to be good for me, okay? I view it as a training camp, all right? And I will not let the government break me. Like I said before, you can take my freedom, you can throw me in a cage, but you can't take my soul. I will always have that. And I have taken my power back, and I've gone ahead and given you everything you need to throw me away. All right, all you need is 12 jurors. That's all. Play this podcast at the trial. All right, take that shit to trial, bitch. Go ahead. All right, but just know that that's not going to stop me from drinking and driving. All right, what's going to stop me from drinking and driving? God. God's the only thing that can change me. Not the government, not punishment, but God. Mercy. Mercy for sure. Mercy has a bigger effect on people than punishment, all right? Love has a bigger effect on people than fear, all right? That's what this is about. Love over fear, all right? Mercy over punishment. But I, of course, have to do my time, all right? All right, I can't be coming on here and being like, guys, please give me mercy. Please love me, all right? No, it's fine. That would make me look like a pussy, all right? I'm going to do my time, all right? If that's what God wants. But this is everything you need to convict me, all right? So, yeah. Why did I do it? Why do I drink and drive? I do it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. Made me feel alive. Over and out.